As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet, I found myself once again at the small cafe nestled at the corner of our bustling street. The place was a sanctuary, a refuge where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of soft jazz, creating an ambience that wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. It was here, amidst the chatter of strangers and the clink of porcelain cups, that I often sought solace from the relentless demands of my life with Haruki. Haruki had been my everything once, a charismatic whirlwind of ambition with dreams as vast as the sky. It was his vision that had pulled me into his orbit, the gravity of his aspirations so immense that I found myself revolving around him, my own dreams fading into the backdrop of his success. But today, something was different. As I sat by the window, gazing out at the world that continued to spin without pause, I felt the stirrings of a shift within me. A gentle rebellion against the narrative I had been living, where I was the steadfast pillar supporting Haruki's ascent. His calls had become less frequent, his presence a mere shadow in the tapestry of my day-to-day existence. Yet, in those spaces he left behind, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had long been buried. It was there in that cafe that I first met Kazuki. He was a regular, like me, his presence unassuming yet somehow magnetic. Kazuki had an artist's soul, his eyes always searching, seeing beauty in the mundane. It was his warmth that first drew me in, a kindness that shone through every interaction, unlike Haruki's fiery intensity. One evening, as I sat sketching absent-mindedly in my notebook, Kazuki approached with a gentle smile. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. I nodded, a little surprised by my own eagerness for company. "Your sketches are beautiful," he commented, peering at the scattered pages. "You capture emotion in a way that resonates." His words were like a balm to the ache I hadn't realized was there, a validation I hadn't known I craved. We talked for hours that night, our conversation flowing seamlessly from art to life, to dreams. Kazuki listened with an attentiveness that made me feel seen, his interest genuine and devoid of ulterior motive. Days turned into weeks, and our meetings became a cherished routine. With Kazuki, I discovered a part of myself that had been dormant, a person who was more than just a supporting role in someone else's story. He encouraged my art, celebrated my achievements, however small, and in his presence, I felt the intoxicating freedom to be authentically myself. But as the weeks passed, an inevitable conflict began to brew within me. Haruki was a force that loomed large, a constant reminder of the life I had built around him. He was a man driven by ambition, and I was the foundation upon which he stood. Yet, with Kazuki, I glimpsed a future where I could stand tall on my own, unshadowed by another's dreams. The day Haruki called, his voice crackling through the phone line with the same urgency it always carried, I felt the weight of choice pressing down on me. "I've got an opportunity," he announced, excitement lacing his words. "But it means I'll be away more often. I need you to handle things here." His request was nothing new, yet it now rang hollow, a demand that echoed through the void of our relationship. I realized then that I had been waiting for this moment, a chance to redefine the boundaries of my life. As the call ended, I was left with a decision that would alter the course of my journey. Haruki's career had been my anchor for so long, but in Kazuki, I found the courage to let go, to drift into uncharted waters where my dreams awaited. That evening, as I walked towards the cafe where Kazuki would be waiting, the air was crisp with the promise of change. The world around me felt alive, each step a silent vow to choose a path that honored my own desires. I was ready to embrace the unknown, to step beyond the confines of what had been and venture into the realm of what could be. As the rain tapped gently against the window pane, I sat alone in the dimly lit cafe, my fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The aroma of jasmine mingled with the scent of freshly baked pastries, creating a comforting cocoon around me. I watched as droplets raced each other down the glass, their paths crossing, merging, an apt metaphor for the tangled web of emotions I found myself ensnared in. It had been months since I left Hiroshi, the man who had once been my everything. Back then, his ambition had been dazzling, a flame that drew me in with promises of a shared future. But somewhere along the way, I had become merely a stepping stone in his ascent. My own dreams had withered in the shadows of his success, my sacrifices overlooked, my contributions dismissed as trivial. I sighed, the sound lost in the chatter of the cafe. My heart ached with the weight of unspoken words, of years spent in silent support, while my own aspirations lay dormant. Yet, leaving Hiroshi had not been the end. It was the beginning of something I had never anticipated. That something was Yuki. We met on a day much like this one, under the steel-gray sky of an impending storm. I had been volunteering at a community art project, a small act of rebellion against the inertia of my past life. Yuki was there too, his hands smeared with paint, an irrepressible smile lighting up his face as he helped a group of children bring their vision to life on the canvas. His laughter was infectious, a melody that cut through the noise of my doubts. And when he spoke to me, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity I hadn't realized I craved, I felt seen for the first time in years. "Art isn't just about what you create," he had said, his voice rich with passion. "It's about how it connects us, how it makes us feel alive." Those words had echoed within me, stirring something long, dormant. Over time, Yuki and I grew closer, our friendship blossoming into something unexpected. He listened, not just to the words I spoke, but to the silences, the hesitations. He valued my thoughts, my dreams, and encouraged me to pursue them with a fervor I had forgotten I possessed. But even as I reveled in this newfound connection, a part of me remained tethered to the past, to the version of myself that had been molded by Hiroshi's ambitions. It was a struggle to redefine my identity, to embrace the person I was becoming. One evening, as Yuki and I strolled through the park, the setting sun painting the world in hues of orange and gold, he stopped abruptly. Turning to face me, his expression serious yet tender, he took my hands in his. "You deserve to shine, to be the star of your own story," he said, his voice a gentle caress against the cool breeze. "Don't let anyone dim your light." His words struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a truth I had long ignored. For so long, I had allowed myself to be a secondary character in my own life, content with the shadows. Now, standing there with Yuki, I realized I wanted more. I deserved more. But letting go of the past is never easy. It clings to you, a ghost of what once was. And as much as I yearned to embrace this new chapter, doubts lingered, fear whispering insidious lies that I was undeserving of such happiness. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with the ghosts of decisions past and the shimmering promise of what could be. Yet, for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. With Yuki by my side, I knew I could face whatever lay ahead. As the rain began to fall in earnest, I drained the last of my tea and stood, leaving the warmth of the cafe behind. The world outside was a symphony of sights and sounds, the air crisp with possibility. I stepped into the rain, letting it wash over me, a baptism of sorts for the life I was ready to embrace. And with each step forward, I felt lighter, liberated from the chains of what had been, moving toward a future where I was valued, where I mattered. In the distance, Yuki waited, a beacon of warmth and acceptance, and I knew I was finally on the right path. The autumn air was crisp, carrying whispers of change on its cool breeze as I sat in the small park nestled between towering skyscrapers. The city buzzed around me, a symphony of honks and chatter, but my mind was elsewhere, tracing the path of leaves tumbling from trees. It was in these quiet moments that I found solace, away from the constant demands of my job and the unyielding expectations of Haruto. Haruto. Just thinking of his name brought a familiar weight to my chest. We had been together for 5 years, each year a blend of hopeful beginnings and lingering disillusionments. He was ambitious, driven, qualities that first drew me to him. But as he climbed the corporate ladder, reaching new heights, I found myself rooted in place, supporting his ascent while my own dreams lay dormant. I remember the night he came home, eyes gleaming with triumph. He had landed a significant promotion, one that promised greater prestige and the rewards that came with it. I congratulated him with a smile, masking the ache of my own stagnation. In the quiet corners of my heart, a yearning began to unfurl, longing for recognition, not just from Haruto, but from the world I felt increasingly invisible in. Days turned into weeks, and with Haruto's new position came longer hours and more responsibilities. Our conversations dwindled to brief exchanges, his words often tinged with exhaustion and preoccupation. I became the caretaker of our shared life, managing the mundane tasks that kept our world spinning while he chased his ambitions. It was a role I had fallen into, one I believed was necessary for his success, yet it left me hollow, my own aspirations overshadowed by his. Then, one afternoon, amidst the monotony of routine, I met Ren. It was at the bookstore, a place I frequented when the walls of our apartment felt too confining. He was in the poetry section, thumbing through a collection of haikus. There was a softness about him, an aura of quiet confidence that drew me in. Our eyes met, and he offered a gentle smile that seemed to see right through the layers I wore. We struck up a conversation, first about books, then about life. He had an easy way of speaking, his words weaving a tapestry of warmth and understanding. Unlike Haruto's sharp focus on the future, Ren lived in the present, savoring each moment as it came. As we talked, I felt an unfamiliar spark, a sense of being truly seen for the first time in years. Our meetings became a regular occurrence, each encounter peeling back a layer of my guarded heart. With Ren, I rediscovered parts of myself I had long forgotten. He encouraged my passions, urged me to pursue the dreams I had shelved in favor of practicality. I began to write again, the words flowing from me like a long dormant river, finally breaking free. But with this newfound joy came a creeping guilt. Haruto was not an unkind man, he simply prioritized his career above all else. Yet, in doing so, he had inadvertently relegated me to the background of our shared life. I was torn between loyalty and the intoxicating possibility of a life where I was valued for who I was, not just for what I could provide. The turning point came one evening, as Haruto and I sat in silence, the television murmuring in the background. I watched him, his face illuminated by the flickering screen, and realized how far apart we had drifted. It was then that I knew I had to make a choice, not just for myself, but for both of us. I took a deep breath, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Haruto, we need to talk." He looked up, surprised, and in that moment, I saw a flicker of the man I had once fallen in love with. It was time to lay bare the truth, to confront the reality we had both been avoiding. As I spoke, the words came, easily, each one a step towards liberation. I told him about my struggles, my dreams, and the emptiness that had grown between us. I did not mention Ren. This was not about him, but about reclaiming my own life. Haruto listened, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding, and finally to acceptance. In the end, our paths had diverged, not out of malice, but because we had both changed, our needs and desires evolving in different directions. It was painful to say goodbye, but it was necessary, a bittersweet farewell that opened the door to new beginnings. As I left our shared home for the last time, the weight I had carried for so long began to lift. The city stretched out before me, alive with possibility, and I took my first steps into a future where I was the architect of my own destiny. I never imagined my life would veer onto such a turbulent path, where every step felt like a dance on a tightrope, swaying precariously between the shadows of my past and the light of an uncertain future. His name was Riku, a man whose ambitions towered like the skyscrapers he dreamed of designing. Our love once felt like a constellation of stars, bright and promising. But those stars slowly dimmed, leaving only the cold, vast emptiness of space between us. At first, I admired his drive. Riku was a vision of determination, a whirlwind of creativity and ambition. He was the kind of person who could make you feel like you were standing on the edge of something extraordinary, ready to take a leap into greatness. But as his aspirations grew, so did the demands on my time and energy. His career became a ravenous beast, consuming every moment of our lives, leaving me to shoulder the burdens of everyday existence alone. I became the silent architect behind his success, laying the foundation of our lives while he reached for the stars. I juggled jobs, managed the household, and kept our world spinning, all for the promise of a future where we'd both bask in the glory of his achievements. But that day never came. The more I gave, the less I seemed to matter in his grand design. It was during one of those endless, lonely nights when the city's lights twinkled like distant reminders of dreams forgotten that I met Yuta. He was a musician, his melodies weaving through the air with an effortless grace that tugged at my heartstrings. I stumbled into a local bar after a particularly draining day, seeking solace in the anonymity of strangers. Yuta's music was like a balm for my weary soul, each note resonating with a truth I had buried deep within. Yuta's eyes met mine from across the room, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. It was as if he could see the invisible chains that bound me, the weight of unspoken words and untold stories. After his set, he approached me with a gentle smile, his presence warm and inviting like a summer breeze. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing as naturally as the river that wound through our city. Yuta listened, really listened, with an openness and understanding that I hadn't realized I craved. He asked about my dreams, my passions, those pieces of myself that I'd tucked away like forgotten treasures. In his company, I felt seen and heard, my voice no longer an echo lost in the vastness of someone else's ambitions. As the days turned into weeks, Yuta became a constant in my life, a beacon of light guiding me through the fog of uncertainty. He encouraged me to pursue my own dreams, to find joy in the simple act of being. His belief in me was like a seed planted in the barren soil of my self-doubt, gradually blossoming into something beautiful and resilient. I found myself rediscovering parts of me I thought were lost forever. I took up painting again, my brush dancing across the canvas like a bird set free from its cage. Each stroke was a testament to my journey, a kaleidoscope of emotions that had long been trapped within. Yuta's unwavering support was my muse, his laughter a melody that echoed through my heart. But life, in its unpredictable nature, soon tested the newfound balance I had begun to cherish. Riku, too absorbed in his own world to notice the undercurrents of change, remained oblivious to the shifting sands of our relationship. He continued to chase his dreams with a singular focus, blind to the cracks forming beneath the surface of our shared reality. One evening, as I stood in the kitchen, the aroma of simmering curry filling the air, Riku announced he had secured a major project overseas. His excitement was palpable, his eyes alight with the fire of opportunity. Yet, in his elation, he failed to see the fatigue etched into my features, the silent plea for recognition that hovered between us like a ghost. "Isn't this incredible?" he exclaimed, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Think of what this means for us." Us. The word felt hollow, a mere echo of what it once signified. As Riku spoke of his plans, a realization dawned upon me, a truth as stark and undeniable as the sunrise breaking through the night. In his grand vision, there was no room for us, only him and his dreams. I excused myself, the weight of his dreams pressing down on my chest like an anchor. As I stepped outside, the cool night air wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. I needed to breathe, to think, to find my way through the tangled web of emotions that threatened to consume me. Under the canopy of stars, I found clarity. I realized that I had been waiting for life to happen, for love to find its way back to me, while it had been quietly unfolding in the form of a gentle soul who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. In Yuta, I saw a future where my dreams mattered, where my voice was not just heard, but celebrated. With renewed determination, I knew what I had to do. It was time to break free from the shadows of the past and step into the light of my own making. It was time to choose me, to embrace the love that had been, patiently waiting all along. The air was crisp as I walked the familiar path to the small cafe that had become my sanctuary. The autumn leaves danced around my feet, whispering secrets only they knew. My heart, however, was a cacophony of conflicting emotions, each vying for dominance. It was here, in this little corner of the world, that I could momentarily escape the relentless demands of my life with Hiroshi. Hiroshi, my partner of 5 years, had always been ambitious. His dreams of becoming a renowned architect consumed him, leaving little room for anything or anyone else. I had admired his determination at first, believing that supporting him was a noble act of love. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself in the shadow of his aspirations. I pushed open the door to the cafe, greeted by the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The warmth of the interior enveloped me, a stark contrast to the chill outside. I nodded at the barista, a kind soul who had memorized my order long ago, and made my way to my usual corner. As I settled into the worn leather chair, my eyes instinctively darted to the mural on the opposite wall. It depicted a phoenix rising from the ashes, its vibrant colors a stark reminder of rebirth and renewal. I often found myself drawn to it, as if it held the answers I sought. I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness ground me in the present. My thoughts wandered back to Hiroshi. He was often too busy to notice the small things, like how I had been working 2 jobs to support us while he pursued his dreams. My own aspirations had been shelved indefinitely, a sacrifice I had made willingly. Or so I had thought. The bell above the door chimed, pulling me from my reverie. I glanced up to see a figure silhouetted against the light. It was Akira, a regular at the cafe and a recent acquaintance. He was a writer, his life filled with stories and characters that seemed to spill over into reality. There was something about him that intrigued me, a quiet confidence that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. Akira caught my eye and offered a warm smile, one that reached his eyes and seemed to hold a promise of understanding. He approached my table, his presence a gentle disruption to my solitude. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice smooth and inviting. I gestured to the empty seat across from me, and he settled in with a casual grace. We exchanged pleasantries, our conversation flowing effortlessly. Unlike Hiroshi, Akira listened, truly listened, and responded with insights that resonated with my own unvoiced thoughts. As we spoke, I found myself sharing more than I had intended, the words spilling out like an untamed river. I told him of the dreams I had put aside, the sacrifices I had made, and the growing emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. Akira listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, his silence an assurance that my words were safe with him. "You deserve to be seen, not just as a part of someone else's dream," Akira said softly, his words hanging in the air like a delicate melody. "Your dreams matter too." His statement lingered in my mind long after our conversation ended. It was a truth I had long buried under layers of duty and obligation. Akira had unknowingly planted a seed of change within me, one that I knew would soon take root. In the days that followed, I found myself drawn to the cafe more frequently, each visit a balm to my restless spirit. Akira and I continued our conversations, each one peeling back the layers I had so carefully constructed over the years. It wasn't long before I realized that Akira was becoming more than just a friend. He was a mirror reflecting the parts of myself I had forgotten, a reminder of the dreams I once held dear. But even as I felt myself drawn to him, I was acutely aware of the tumultuous path that lay ahead. The time had come to confront my reality with Hiroshi. The thought filled me with trepidation, but also a newfound resolve. I couldn't continue living in the shadows of someone else's life. I had to reclaim my own story, even if it meant walking away from the life I had known. As I left the cafe that day, the mural of the phoenix caught my eye once more. Its vibrant wings seemed to shimmer with life, urging me to rise from the ashes of my own making. With each step, the weight on my shoulders lightened, and for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of hope. The cafe was empty except for the quiet hum of the espresso machine and the faint chatter of late-afternoon pedestrians passing by the window. I sat at my usual corner table, the one by the window where sunlight streamed in just right, casting warm patterns on the wooden surface. This spot had become my sanctuary, a place where I could momentarily escape from the shadows that loomed in my life. I stared at my reflection in the glass, my thoughts muddled with the echoes of the past. It hadn't been long since I ended things with Taro, yet the weight of those years still clung to me like a persistent fog. We had met in college, both of us brimming with dreams and boundless energy. But as the years passed, the scales tipped, and my dreams were overshadowed by his ambitions. I became the steadfast pillar, supporting him as he climbed the rungs of his career ladder, while my own aspirations were set aside like forgotten trinkets. At first, I believed in us, in the promise of a shared future. But as his success grew, so did his distance. I was left to navigate the mundane, managing our home, our lives, while he basked in the spotlight of his achievements. My sacrifices were invisible, acknowledged only in passing praises that felt more like placations. It was during one of those solitary afternoons at the cafe that I met Aiko. She was a whirlwind of color and laughter, her presence as vibrant as the paintings she created. We struck up a conversation, initially just two strangers sharing a moment of human connection. But as the days turned into weeks, our bond deepened, rooted in a mutual understanding and respect that I hadn't realized I craved. Aiko saw me, not just the role I played in my relationship with Taro, but the person I was beneath it all. She listened, truly listened, as I recounted my dreams of becoming a writer, dreams that had been pushed aside. Her eyes would light up with genuine interest, her encouragement unwavering. "Why don't you pursue it?" she asked one day, her voice a mix of curiosity and challenge. "You're a storyteller at heart, and the world needs more of that." Her words ignited a spark within me, one that had long been dormant. It was as if she had unlocked a door, revealing a path I had forgotten existed. I found myself writing again, pouring my soul into stories that had been waiting patiently in the recesses of my mind. But change, I realized, wasn't just about rediscovering my passions. It was about confronting the reality of my relationship with Taro. Each day with Aiko highlighted the chasm that had grown between us, a chasm filled with unspoken resentments and unmet needs. The more I wrote, the more I understood that I had been living in a shadow, and it was time to step into the light. One evening, after a particularly draining day, I returned home to find Taro working late again, his attention fixed on his laptop. I stood in the doorway, watching him, a pang of sadness mingling with resolve. It was time for a conversation that had been long overdue. "Taro," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He glanced up, surprised by my tone. "We need to talk." He nodded, closing his laptop, but the distance in his eyes was undeniable. We spoke for hours, unraveling the threads of our relationship. I shared my feelings, my frustrations, and for the first time, he listened without interruption. The weight of our unspoken truths hung in the air, heavy but necessary. In the end, we both understood that our paths had diverged. There was no malice, no anger, just a mutual acknowledgement of what had been and what could no longer continue. Leaving was bittersweet, but as I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a sense of liberation, a freedom that had been a long time coming. I was embracing a new chapter, one where I was the protagonist of my own story. Aiko was waiting for me at the cafe the next morning. Her smile was radiant, her presence a balm to my weary heart. "Ready for your next adventure?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with promise. I nodded, feeling the warmth of hope unfurling within me. "Yes," I replied, "I think I am." As the first cherry blossoms of spring began to unfurl their delicate petals, painting the city with a soft pink hue, I found myself standing at the threshold of a new beginning. My name is Akira, and for the past 5 years, I had been the silent architect behind Kaito's rising career. Kaito, with his sharp wit and disarming charm, was someone I once believed in wholeheartedly. I was the wind. Beneath his wings, the one who bore the weight of his dreams while he soared into the stratosphere of success. But as the seasons changed, so too did the clarity of my own heart. I had been working tirelessly at a small cafe tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, my hands stained with coffee and ink, my mind a maze of unfulfilled aspirations. Kaito was always busy, always too preoccupied with his next big deal, his next climb up the corporate ladder. I convinced myself that his success was ours, that his achievements were worth the sacrifices I made. One evening, after another long shift, I walked home under a sky that blushed with the colors of dusk. The streets were alive with the sounds of laughter and chatter, yet I felt an emptiness that echoed louder than any noise around me. It was then, amidst the crowd, that I first saw Haru. He was a painter, his hands splattered with colors as vibrant as the dreams I'd once held. Our paths crossed by chance, an accidental brush of shoulders, an apologetic glance exchanged. His eyes, a deep shade of amber, held a warmth that thawed the frost that had settled in my heart. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle, like a melody carried on the evening breeze. I nodded, offering a small smile, one that felt foreign after so long. Days turned into weeks, and Haru became a fixture in my life. We would meet at the cafe, where he would sit by the window, sketching the world as it passed by, capturing its essence in strokes of charcoal and paint. He saw beauty in the mundane, in the moments I had long overlooked. It was through his eyes that I began to see myself anew. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden rays over the city, Haru invited me to his studio. It was a modest space, filled with canvases in various stages of completion. The air was thick with the scent of turpentine and creativity. "This is where I find my freedom," he said, gesturing to the colorful chaos around him. I envied his passion, his ability to translate emotions into art. As I stood there, surrounded by his creations, I realized how much I had given up for Kato's dreams. I had lost sight of my own desires, my own potential. Haru seemed to sense my turmoil. "You know," he said, "sometimes it's okay to step back and find what truly makes you happy." His words lingered in my mind long after I left his studio. I found myself questioning the path I was on, the life I was living. Kaido's success was no longer a balm for my soul. It was a burden I carried, one that grew heavier with each passing day. The turning point came on a night when the stars seemed unusually bright. Kaido had come home late, as usual, his mind abuzz with plans and meetings. He barely noticed me, his focus already on tomorrow. I watched him, my heart aching with the realization that I was a mere shadow in his world. In that moment, I understood that I needed to step into the light, to reclaim my own narrative. The decision was both terrifying and liberating. Haru had shown me that I was more than an accessory to someone else's success. I was a story waiting to be told, a canvas yet to be painted. The next morning, I left a note for Kato, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. I wrote of dreams unfulfilled, of a love that had faded into complacency. I thanked him for the memories, for the lessons learned, and then I walked away, my steps steady and sure. Finding Haru was like stepping into a world where I was valued for who I was, not for what I could do for someone else. With him, I found a partner who saw me, who cherished the person I was becoming. Our journey was just beginning, a tapestry woven from the threads of friendship, respect, and love. As I embraced this new chapter, I knew that life, much like art, was about finding beauty in the unexpected, about daring to paint outside the lines. I was ready to create my masterpiece, to live a life that was truly my own. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the cityscape. I stood by the window, the evening breeze ruffling the curtains like gentle whispers. The apartment felt empty, echoing with the silence of another night spent alone. It had been this way for months, ever since Hiroshi took that promotion. He was always busy, always somewhere else, building his empire while I masked my loneliness with the demands of his schedule and the weight of his expectations. We met in college, a whirlwind of shared dreams and late-night study sessions. Back then, Hiroshi was different. Ambitious, yes, but attentive. He used to listen to my poetry, even claimed to see the world in the colors I painted with words. But as the years passed, I became more of a footnote in his life. My aspirations shelved in favor of supporting his ever-growing ambitions. I sighed, turning away from the window. The apartment was adorned with reminders of his success: awards, certificates, the latest gadgets. Yet, despite the luxury, it felt like a gilded cage. I was the loyal partner, the silent supporter, but inside, a quiet rebellion was brewing. An unexpected knock at the door pulled me from my reverie. It was Tatsuya, our neighbor from 2 floors up. His visits had become a small comfort, a reminder that I wasn't entirely invisible. Tatsuya was a freelance artist, a free spirit with paint-stained fingers and an infectious laugh. His presence was like a splash of color in my grayscale world. "Hey," he greeted, handing me a basket of freshly baked bread. "Thought you might like this. It's a new recipe I tried." "Thank you," I replied, smiling. The warmth of the bread seeped into my hands, a comforting weight against the loneliness that threatened to suffocate me. We sat together, the aroma of the bread mingling with the evening air. Tatsuya talked about his latest project, a mural that was taking shape in the heart of the city. His eyes sparkled with passion, each word painting a vivid picture of his vision. It was impossible not to be drawn in, to feel the pulse of life in his stories. As the evening wore on, our conversation turned to dreams and what-ifs. Tatsuya listened with an intensity that made me feel like the center of the universe, his presence a stark contrast to the shadow Hiroshi's absence cast over my life. "Do you ever think about what you really want?" Tatsuya asked, his gaze steady and searching. I hesitated, the question echoing in the silence between us. I had buried my desires so deep that unearthing them felt like an unfamiliar task. "I used to write," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "Poetry, mostly. But it's been a long time." "You should start again," he encouraged. "The world needs more beauty, more voices like yours." His words lingered in the air, a gentle nudge towards a path I had long forgotten. That night, after Tatsuya left, I found myself sitting at my desk, pen in hand, the blank page before me a canvas waiting to be filled. Tentatively, I began to write, the words flowing like a long-lost melody. Each line was a step towards rediscovery, a journey back to myself. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, imperceptibly, my life began to shift. I carved out time for my poetry, sharing my work with Tatsuya, who became my confidant and critic. His encouragement was a balm to my wounded spirit, a reminder that my voice mattered. But with this newfound joy came guilt. Hiroshi was still my partner, still the man I had once loved deeply. Yet, every encounter felt like a transaction, a reminder of the life I had sacrificed for his dreams. I was torn between loyalty and the burgeoning realization that I deserved more. One evening, as the city buzzed with life below, Hiroshi returned home unexpectedly early. His presence filled the room, an imposing figure against the backdrop of my newfound happiness. We sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken words. "Is everything okay?" he asked, breaking the tension. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in months. The man before me was a stranger, his face etched with the lines of stress and ambition. "Hiroshi," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I think we need to talk." His eyes met mine, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. In that moment, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be a supporting character in my own life. The stakes had been raised, and the journey towards reclaiming myself had truly begun. The rain pattered against the window, a gentle rhythm that matched the beat of my heart as I sat in the dim light of my apartment. It was one of those nights where memories floated to the surface, mingling with the present in a dance of shadows and light. A cup of steaming tea rested in my hands, its warmth a comforting contrast to the chill seeping through the glass panes. I found myself reflecting on the path I'd taken, a journey that seemed both distant and vivid. My time with Kenji had been marked by the relentless tick of a clock, each second a reminder of the sacrifices I made for his dreams. I had always been the steady hand, the one who held the fort while he sculpted his ambitions into reality. But somewhere along the way, my own aspirations had slipped through the cracks, lost amidst the chaos of his rising success. Kenji was a force of nature, his charisma as potent as the storm that raged outside. In his presence, I had often felt like a supporting character in a story where he was the protagonist. For years, I convinced myself that my role was enough, that my happiness was tethered to his achievements. But the truth was a delicate thread unraveling with each passing day, leaving me exposed to the cold winds of realization. It was during a particularly frenetic evening at one of Kenji's networking events, surrounded by the glittering elite, that I first met Hiroshi. He was a quiet observer, eyes sharp yet gentle, standing apart from the crowd. Our paths crossed as I sought refuge from the overwhelming noise in a secluded corner of the room. Hiroshi's presence was a balm, his conversation a refreshing breeze that swept away the suffocating air of pretense. Our encounters became more frequent, each one a tapestry woven with laughter and shared silences. Hiroshi saw me in a way Kenji never had, his gaze penetrating the layers of obligation and duty that had defined my existence for so long. With him, I discovered a forgotten part of myself, a spark that flickered tentatively back to life. Yet, the guilt of betraying Kenji's trust gnawed at me, an ever-present shadow that clung to my conscience. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between my old life and this burgeoning connection with Hiroshi grew. I found myself standing at a crossroads, the weight of indecision pressing heavily on my shoulders. Kenji's world demanded my loyalty, yet Hiroshi's offered a glimpse of something I had long yearned for: authenticity and mutual respect. The breaking point came one evening. When Kenji returned home, his eyes alight with excitement over a new business venture. As he spoke, I watched the familiar animation in his features, the fervor that had once been so captivating. But I realized then that his dreams were no longer mine to carry. The realization was a bittersweet liberation, a release from the chains of an unspoken pact that had bound me. I told Kenji about Hiroshi, about the growing chasm between us that could no longer be ignored. His reaction was predictably volatile, a storm of hurt and betrayal that left destruction in its wake. Yet, in the aftermath of our confrontation, a strange calm settled within me. It was as if the storm had washed away the remnants of my old self, leaving behind a clearer vision of who I was meant to be. As I stood by the window, the rain a gentle lullaby, I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. My journey with Hiroshi was uncharted territory, a path filled with uncertainty and promise. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of agency over my destiny, a newfound strength that pulsed through my veins. The city lights shimmered in the distance, a kaleidoscope of possibilities that beckoned me forward. I took a sip of tea, the warmth a reminder that I was alive, that I had chosen to carve my own path. With each passing moment, the echoes of the past faded, replaced by the symphony of hope and renewal. The morning sunlight seeped through the sheer curtains of my modest apartment, casting gentle patterns on the walls that seemed to dance along with the soft breeze. I sat at the small wooden table, staring at the half-empty cup of tea, its steam intertwining with my thoughts. 4 years had slipped by since I first met Hiroshi, and each day, those years felt increasingly like a blur. I had been his anchor, his support, as he pursued his dreams with relentless fervor. Yet here I was, feeling more like a shadow than a partner in his life. Hiroshi was brilliant. There was no denying that. His energy was magnetic, drawing people to him with his charismatic smile and ambitious ideas. When we met, he spoke of building an empire, of changing the world. I was captivated, and perhaps a little naive, entangled in the whirlwind of his vision. But as time passed, I realized I was merely a stepping stone in his grand plan, a silent supporter who managed our lives while he chased the success I had once believed would be ours. Each evening, he would return home, his face alight with stories of his day, the triumphs and even the setbacks, which he would recount with dramatic flair. I listened intently, my own tales of the day buried beneath his, deemed insignificant in the face of his ambitions. It was a pattern that had become all too familiar, a pattern that left me feeling invisible. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a rare evening when Hiroshi was too engrossed in his work to notice me slipping away to a local cafe. It was a quaint little place, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, far removed from the bustling streets and Hiroshi's demanding world. As I sipped my coffee, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of liberation in the anonymity of the crowd. It was there, amidst the clatter of cups and the low hum of conversations, that I met Akira. He was sketching quietly by the window, his fingers deftly moving across the page. There was a serene intensity about him, a calmness that seemed to resonate with the quiet yearning in my heart. Our eyes met briefly, and he offered a warm, genuine smile, the kind that spoke of understanding without words. We began talking, the conversation flowing effortlessly as if we had known each other for years. Akira was an artist, passionate about capturing the fleeting beauty of everyday life. He listened intently, his gaze unwavering, as I spoke of my life, my dreams, and the emptiness that had settled within me. I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Days turned into weeks, and our meetings became a cherished ritual. Akira's presence was a balm to my weary soul, his words a reminder of the person I once was, the person I had lost in the shadows of Hiroshi's ambitions. He valued my thoughts, my feelings, and in his eyes, I found a reflection of the strength I had forgotten. But with this newfound connection came an inner turmoil, a conflict that grew with each passing day. I felt torn between the comfort of familiarity with Hiroshi and the burgeoning sense of self-worth that Akira inspired. It was a delicate balance, one that teetered precariously on the edge of discovery and decision. One evening, as I returned home, Hiroshi was waiting, his expression fraught with frustration. He spoke of a missed opportunity, a deal that had slipped through his fingers. His words were sharp, tinged with an edge I had not seen before. In that moment, the gulf between us yawned wide, and I realized how far apart we had drifted. The confrontation left me shaken, yet it also